Great. Okay, so when we think about defense, we often think about it from a very tactical perspective. That is, in sort of a current time frame, in the present. Here are vulnerabilities, here are threats, here are attack events. And we tend to build our defenses around those things. But we also need to look at it from a more strategic perspective. That is, move the timeline out from present out into the future. That is, do things like being able to develop future potential emerging threat scenarios and things like that. And so there are a lot of key elements that are involved in doing that. And one of the key elements is basically gaining a better understanding of the relationship between people and digital technology. And that may be very, very helpful to policymakers so they can help push money and resources in the right direction. So we're going to take a journey today across 3 epochs of the relationship between people and digital technology. 1, the hacking movement. 2, the cybercrime movement. And 3, something that hasn't happened yet, but I think is going to happen, is the cyberterror movement. So we'll sort of go into the future. And we're not going to be alone. We're going to have good company in this journey. We're going to have Charles Tilly, who's one of the fathers of modern social movement theory. And we're also going to have Hera and Huang, who basically took Tilly's work and pushed it into the digital realm, into what's called new social movement theory. And then we're going to have a little help from Nancy Whittier, who basically looks at how social movements spin off into other movements, okay? So anyway, let's start with our first one, Epoch 1, the hacking movement. So something that we've known for a long time, basically, is motivations of malicious online actors and acts. And basically, there are 6 of them that form this pretty fabulous taxonomy: money, ego, entertainment, cause, entry to social group, and status. It's a pretty nice heuristic. And it's helpful in a sense, for example, in the hacking movement, we see its status and ego. In the cybercrime epoch, we see its money. In the cyber terror, we see its cause. But not necessarily all the time. You have these other 5 causes or 4 or 5 causes that aren't primary motivations, but may emerge. And so it gives you an idea, oh, I haven't seen this yet, but I know I have 6 motivations. And so maybe in this movement, we'll see one of these other motivations emerge, so you're not surprised. So real quickly, just going to roll through some of these. So basically, money, and known news to anyone, a very common motivator. It wasn't common when the hacking movement first started. People were shunned if you went hacked for money, but not that way anymore. Anyway, there are all sorts of currencies, stolen credit cards, bank accounts, root ownership of compromised machines, secret data, Bitcoin, you name it. There are all sorts of digital currencies out there being traded. And it's interesting, because money has a very powerful effect on social structure and social relations. If you look at Maurer, who did a really fabulous article on the anthology of money, you'll see that whenever you inject money into a culture where it either hasn't been before or whether it's really been sort of ignored, it basically creates chaos all over in that culture. It just makes a big mess, okay? And actually, we're going to see how money acts as an outside force to attract individuals who were outside the hacking community, and how that money provided these outsiders with power and prestige inside the hacking community that they normally would never be assigned to. So ego is the next one, derived from satisfaction that comes from overcoming technical obstacles, idea of mastery over the machine, things like that, even the idea of besting a nation state. Entertainment. Originally, entertainment was reasonably common in an early hacking community, and then it sort of went away. But now it's come back in the last 3 or 4 years, 5 years, with an infusion of less technical individuals in the digital space, lots of targets. Expanded social environment, lots of sort of virtual environments to go do things in. You've seen the emergence of people like griefers and things like that. So that's entertainment. Cause, probably the most serious threat from a national security perspective. Most common instance of this is hacktivism, the use of the internet to promote a particular political, social, economic, or social cause. There are many levels of magnitude for this, and one of the most traditional causes for terrorism and cyber terrorism. Entrance to a social group. Hacking groups tend to be status homogenous in nature. People with similar levels of skills, but maybe in different things. This guy's a kernel guy. This guy's a network security guy, et cetera, et cetera. And it implies that there's a certain level of expertise to get into this group. And exploits and elegant code are one way to basically gain acceptance. And finally, status. The hacking community was and still is a very strong meritocracy. That is, skills and expertise in various things like operating systems, hardware, et cetera, are used as status characteristics to figure out where you are in the status hierarchy, both in your local community as well as the larger national and global community. It's always been around for a long time. Okay? You can really study the social structure of the hacking community. And I did this in a book chapter some time back in a research study where I looked at the jargon file, which basically, had all these terms in there. I was thinking, how can I study the social structure? You can't ask people, tell me about your social structure, because they don't know. But in this document, I said, I found it one day, many, many years ago. I said, oh my God, they wrote everything down about what they thought about their culture. It's sort of like an oral history and cultural history written into words. Fabulous. So by doing this, you can do things like look at different dynamics and dimensions within the social structure. I don't have enough time to even cover much of them other than to say what's really cool is you follow it throughout the years and you can look at how the hacking community basically changed over time by studying the differences in these dimensions over time. And if over lunch you want to chat about this stuff, there's some really amazing things in here that are pretty cool. So let's move on to Epic 2. Not my really favorite epic, cybercrime, but we need to sort of talk about that, so we're going to do that. Let's see what I'm doing with time. 7:53, 4. I might actually have time to talk about this for just a second. So what's interesting is you see these dimensions, technology, derogatory, dimension, status. The one that's really fascinating is magic religion. That is, especially in the early days in the hacking community, and I went to grad school in Silicon Valley during the personal computer revolution, and it was full of magic. In other words, you had wizards that you counted on. Somebody would say, wave a dead chicken. There were actual magic numbers. If you looked in the sort of the Unix manual that talked about disk volumes and things, there were magic numbers you had to deal with. So that was really kind of cool. And it really captured, to some extent, the spirit of the hacking community. And what you can see is that in 1994, there was a lot more, about 9.2% of the entries had to do with magic or religion. And by 2003, it had been dropped more than half, to 4.4, which kind of matched the sort of declining spirit that you saw in the hacker community as it got older. Okay? So let's roll on to Epic 2, the cybercrime movement. Here we are, pretty diagram. So what Whittier talked about, Nancy Whittier talked about in terms of social movements is social movements have sort of a frame movement or a master movement. And other social movements and communities spin off of that. And sometimes these communities are complementary. They have similar values, norms, and they share them with their foundational one. And sometimes when these movements spin off, they have sort of the opposite norms and values. So that you get a variety of different social movements doing spin-off. A pretty interesting thing. And so we can see that money was one of the main forces that basically helped split off the original hacking movement. And what's really interesting is, first there was the emergence of opposition to generating money through hacking in the original culture, and then suddenly there were legal pathways. That is, money started being injected into the original hacking community. And some people spun off into a legal pathway and commercialization and got jobs and got paid good money. Others spun off into the illegal pathways, and that's where we got the cybercrime community. So one of the typical things that criminologists, which I'm not, thank God, basically talk about in terms of cybercrime is through the theory of what's called routine activities theory, which is pretty basic. That's why I don't like it very much, but I mention it because if you're interested, you can go look this stuff up. So basically, cybercrime through the eyes of routine activities theory says, hey, look, you only need sort of three things. You need a motivated or likely offender. Okay, so we can probably dig one of those up. We need the absence of a capable guardian. And that basically means that there aren't authorities there to catch you. There may not be laws that protect people. So basically, there's no capable guardian. And of course, you have to have suitable targets. And there are, of course, plenty of those out on the net. One of the studies that one of my colleagues and I did was studying Russian hacking gangs. Okay? And so we looked at their friendships and communications just to sort of see how they were connected. And here's one of the social network diagrams that we drew out of it. There are 2, 4, 6, 8 different groups here. You probably remember this is back a while in 2012. There was RU Hack, Motherfucker, Hack Zone, Hell Knights, BH Crew, some of the old guys. And you can see where these dark lines are, you can see the strong connections or relationships between the hacking groups. And often, sometimes that happened because one of the members in one of the groups also happened to be a member of the other group. And that's how information and code and resources flowed back and forth between the groups. Here we have another diagram. We're looking at connections between individual actors. And different threat levels. We classified each of the actors and these Russian hacking gangs in terms of their threat level. From 0, which is really basically script kiddies, all the way up to 3, which are folks you don't want to mess with. And what we discovered, there were 2 different sort of typologies for these social networks, for these serious threat actors. One was this kind of typology where you had these red serious threat actors really connected to other people. Lots and lots of connections and transactions and conversations going on. And then you had these guys out here, the social isolated serious threat actors who had almost no connections, were probably practicing OPSEC, and these are the guys you probably should be scared of, okay? So pretty interesting analyses that give you sort of an insight into some of the relationships among some of these gangs. One of my research partners, Tom Holt, talks about the formation of large underground marketplaces and product guarantees and customer service. You've all seen that stuff, so nothing new. Let's talk about the final epic, the Cyberterror Movement. So here we are, finishing the diagram. And typically, cause is the major motivation for cyber terror events and actions and behaviors. But remember, these other ones, money, ego, entertainment, entry to social group, and status, they're the surprises. Those are the things you should look for in the future. Those are the non-obvious things. So that's why this heuristic is actually quite useful. So this is another spin-off from the original hacking community and the cybercrime community. Now, what we think is going to happen, and I've written about it in an IEEE paper and then more coming in a book chapter. This is something we're going to talk about, something called the civilian cyber warrior, and we're also going to talk about nation-state co-opting of non-nation-state actors. Two really sort of interesting things that should be of interest that we may see in the future. So, civilian cyber warrior, I suggested a while back that environmental factors have resulted in something really interesting. That is, here you have an individual actor who can commit a cyber terror event. And this person has a low probability of being apprehended. They have a higher average probability of being successful. They have a low cost of developing and deploying attacks. And they have orders of magnitude increase in potential damage when compared to, say, a traditional terrorist. And so what's happened is, sociologists for decades and decades and decades have studied the power relationship between the individual and the nation state. And now, possibly, for the first time in history, an individual might be able to effectively attack a nation state. And that shifts this traditional power relationship between the individual and the nation state, and decades worth of social theory and stuff out the window. So my colleagues and I decided we'd see if we could get some empirical data to test this idea. And so this is probably one of the only open source, multinational cyber terror studies in existence. We basically constructed a study where we have 4 different experimental cells. And the 2 dimensions to these cells are target of attack, which either could be a foreign country or a homeland, your own homeland, or type of attack, either a cyber attack or a physical attack, okay? And we studied university students across the US, Taiwan, and a consortium of South African universities. Now, some people say, oh, college students, they're not really people, how can you, it's not really generalizable. And in fact, but in this case, college students are actually probably a really good population to take a look at because that's where a lot of the, folks come from. So anyway, we started to look at this data set, and we looked at some bivariate relationships, including, time spent online, past software privacy acts, all sort of positively correlating with willingness to engage in a cyber attack. And we sort of attacked it from 3 different multivariate statistical models. One just using cybercrime predictors, another using political predictors, and then a combined model. And what we discovered is that cyber terror acts and their motivations and the factors involved with them are a lot more complex than we ever thought. But we do see some things, and I'll just mention a couple of them, and then I'll talk about sort of the 2 main things that came out of this. So things like, for example, outgroup antagonism, that is being basically antagonistic to some group that you don't belong to, was positively correlated with a willingness to commit a cyber terror act. But when we took this out of the political model, put it in the combined model, that disappeared. Ineffective law enforcement response to cybercrime, along with outgroup antagonism, along with a willingness to commit physical terrorist attacks, were positively related to willingness to attack a military server, for example. So that was kind of interesting. There are 2 sort of scary things that came out of this study, and we're still mining the data, we're still cranking publications out of this thing because it's so fabulous. The first one is that we found a strong positive correlation between willingness to connect a cyber terror act and willingness to commit a physical terrorist attack. That is a frightening thought, and it's something that folks in the intelligence community back during 9/11 were really fearful of. So that's not very good news. The second piece of news is it's good news, bad news time. So the good news is when we looked at the data, what we saw was, oh, look, only about 1% of the people want to commit some sort of cyber terror act, like basically attacking a nuclear power plant with a radiation release. Now, that also happens to be the bad news, because 1% of a fairly large population, those are a lot of folks. So that is truly worrisome. And finally, I want to sort of talk about another thing I've been interested in recently, and I've written another book chapter. It's going to come out sometime this year, is talking about nation-state, non-nation-state actor relationships. And I've posited there are 4 stages to these relationships. And stage 1 starts with a nation-state and non-nation-state actors becoming salient or aware of each other through either attribution of recent attacks, identified through ongoing investigations by the nation-state, informal contact through hacking cons, network relationships with insiders. That's sort of the first stage. Oh, look, there are these guys over there. Look at what they're doing. The second stage, in terms of this nation-state, non-nation-state actor relationship formation, is motivations for actors to collaborate with a nation-state. So via the, like the Chinese model, nationalism, patriotism, there's an enhanced status or legitimacy from covert association with state security services. That's another motivation to do this. Sometimes it's false flag stuff. And here, there's the old-fashioned traditional and non-traditional coercion. Hey, I know your sister Ada. She's really nice. She's in good health. You want to keep her that way? Well, here's what you can do. Okay. Stage 3 is the maintenance of the relationship. That is, the nation-state will provide immunity from prosecution for assistance. They'll ignore or look the other way about other quasi-legal or illegal activities. Oh, you're stealing money over there? Yeah, okay. Well, we'll ignore that. Resource assistance in form of hardware, software, advice. Grooming of high-status individuals within the groups to basically keep them active and keep them working for you, for the nation-state. And, of course, there's always continued coercion. How's your sister doing? Still healthy? That's fabulous. Finally, stage 4, dissolution. At some point, these things fall apart often. And how does that happen? Sometimes it happens because of the collapse of the covert nature of the relationship. They get outed. The relationship between the nation-state government or the security service and the hacking group or their individuals, it gets outed in the public, and they go, yeah, it's really been nice, good luck, see ya. Replacement by other more skilled actors or groups. Sometimes you'll just get replaced. Scapegoating and prosecution. At some point, the nation-state may say, nah, we've probably gotten just about enough we can about them, and suddenly the nation-state turns on the hacking group and basically charges them, hauls them away, and it's not pretty. And this is kind of the last one, which is kind of unusual and really kind of interesting, and that is the non-nation-state groups and actors terminate the relationship themselves. They walk away from the nation-state. And why is that interesting? Well, because these non-nation-state actors and groups have evolved in the following ways. They have increased technical skills. Now they have the potential to threaten their very own nation-state sponsor that they used to work for. Second, proceeds from financial crimes finance more hardware, software, payments to members. 3, association with nation-state security services lends legitimacy to the hacking or cyberterror group. Hey, now we have legitimacy, we're good, everybody knows us, see ya, bye. So that sort of reinforces something that I think is eventually we're going to see and to become a real threat, which is non-nation-state actors may initiate termination of the relationship and evolve into domestic terror groups that utilize cyberspace to attack their own homeland. It's the old story of like someone who adopts the cute little tiger cub and feeds it, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and one day it bites your hand off, okay? So what lies ahead? Wow, it's a scary environment, I have to say. And hopefully, by developing a better understanding of these social dynamics and these social processes, we can not just fight what's in the current, but look and produce future scenarios where we can use this understanding, this better comprehensive understanding of the relationship between people and digital technology to project potential threats and evaluate them and decide which ones we should pour money and resources into so we don't get surprised. And that's basically it in 25 minutes and 2 seconds. Thank you. Is it question time? Do we have any time left or not? Like a couple? All right.
So Max, question for you. I mean, you're talking all about nation states. You know, you look here, like, for example, in the U.S.
Right.
Probably 85% of the critical infrastructure
Yeah.
is under civilian. I mean, it's
Right.
corporations.
Right.
So I'm assuming that's clumped in there?
Well, they make fabulous targets. Yeah, that's true. And so that's a problem. What else? Any other? Yes, sir.
I can kind of answer this.
Okay, go ahead,
I
Ron.
did a lot of research with Dr. Kilger did on the enterprise corporate side and how it applies to that question. And in my company as advisors, work with corporations to blend the type of research we used to do. And what we found is it almost matches one-to-one for nation state versus, in our specific case, U.S. corporations as far as the organization. And in that fourth stage there at the end of this talk, we're finding an absolute correlation of people that were previously employed by state-sponsored and nation states coming back and going around them and attacking the U.S. corporations directly. So there's a direct correlation.
Yep.
You almost say that the corporations become their own nation states as far as targets and the cyberterror, like, especially multinational.
Yes. Yeah, as far as targets.
Whereas the country sort of disappears when you talk about something as large as GE.
And it can also be something emotional. You know, somebody gets mad at Volkswagen for their emissions or through the roof. You know, bang.
And that falls directly into his
Cause.
Cause in these.
Yep. Any other questions? Oh, yes, sir. Up in the balcony.
Given our current political environment,
Yes.
I know you did not have time to study it for this particular presentation, obviously, the newness of it, but do you think it's going to change some of those perspectives, given some of the, what I would call more liberal expression among college students or other groups that might engage in this, particularly in our homeland, versus some of the others? Do you see any potential changes or potential real danger from that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I am concerned. Given the social movement that is just beginning to push together, cyber is going to become basically a channel through which some of that attempt to change will happen, and we're going to see more domestic attacks. And I think it's become a much more serious threat than it has any time in the past.
It was a leading question.
Yeah, I know. Thanks for the feed. Yes, sir.
Having touched some of this in the last couple of decades, some large nation states, we'll pick on two, the United States and China, are not monolithic in their presentation, in their public presentation.
Yep.
They are siloed.
Yeah.
And they will infight among themselves
Yep.
as to who actually
FSB,
has.
Yep.
And so, in this presentation, you didn't really delve into that particular.
Nope. Have not done that. I've not done enough research on that to write competently about that yet. That's one area I'm still working on.
I have notes for you then.
Oh, good. Yay. Notes are good. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Does any of this impact the development of the technical capability of the groups? Or so you talked about a little bit, of course, the terrorist group gaining capability through the interaction with the nation state, but like in general.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the nation states are basically encouraging and providing resources to these groups, and they're training them, and they're learning, and they're practicing, and they're getting immunity so that they don't get basically hunted down and they stop. So it's very much enhancing the technical skills of individuals out there. And that's one of the reasons why they may split eventually from the nation state. They get good enough, they don't really need them anymore. And they might actually consider them a threat, and they decide they're going to stand up to them.